I remember when I first read the first draft of it, and he was a very academic, very bookish and sort of anal retentive, and I couldn't picture him going on this journey, and I said, I think he really has to be more lighthearted, and that's what he became eventually.
Imagine stepping through a glowing, swirling portal to a world of ancient gods and cosmic mysteries, only to find out the whole thing was held together by garage hacks, desert heat, and absolute chaos behind the scenes. Long before Stargate launched a legendary TV franchise, the original 1994 sci-fi blockbuster was an unbelievable production nightmare packed with secret lawsuits, actor rebellions, and near-disastrous studio blunders. Think you know everything about Roland Emmerich's classic film? Think again. From actors taking roles purely out of spite to mind-blowing visual effects made in a bucket of iced tea, here are 15 weird facts they didn't want you to know. The giant rubber tire incident that almost tanked the movie. When you envision the legendary Stargate portal, you instantly picture an imposing ancient ring covered in mysterious, glowing hieroglyphs. But when director Roland Emmerich and his visual effects crew stepped onto the soundstage to inspect the very first physical prop, they didn't see an alien masterpiece. Instead, they were greeted by what looked like an embarrassingly cheap 22-foot-tall black rubber monster truck tire. Built out of dark, untextured resin and heavy industrial foam, the ring absorbed every single lighting rig on set, completely deadening the scene. Under the harsh studio lights, the cosmic doorway looked less like a $1 million artifact and more like a discarded piece of heavy machinery from an auto repair shop. Panic immediately tore through the production team. Filming was scheduled to begin in less than 48 hours, and redesigning the entire central piece of the movie from scratch would have completely blown through the film's tight budget. Desperate for a quick fix, the art department pulled an all-nighter, rushing to local hardware stores to buy up every can of metallic silver and bronze spray paint they could get their hands on. Working through the night, crew members frantically hand-painted, weathered, and artificially aged the giant ring. By sunrise, the matte black rubber had been transformed into an ancient, weathered metallic artifact that reflected light brilliantly. It was a close call that saved the entire aesthetic of the film before a single frame of footage was shot. While the crew was busy rescuing the set design, one of the movie's main stars was having a complete existential crisis over the script. James Spader took the role purely for the cash and thought the script was awful. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine anyone other than James Spader bringing the quirky, allergy-afflicted linguist, Dr. Daniel Jackson, to life. Spader's nervous energy, stuttered delivery, and intellectual charm gave the original movie its foundational heart and soul. Yet, behind that brilliant performance lay a lead actor who held the entire project in utter contempt from the very moment he picked up the script. Spader has been hilariously, brutally candid in post-release interviews, admitting that he didn't take the role out of artistic passion, a desire to explore the cosmos, or any underlying love for science fiction. In truth, Spader was completely broke at the time and desperately needed money to cover his basic living expenses. When he sat down to read the original screenplay, he found the narrative absurdly far-fetched and thought the dialogue was downright dreadful. He viewed the craft of acting not as a sacred artistic journey, but as a straightforward job, a literal form of manual labor designed to pay bills. To him, standing in a fake desert, staring at pretend space portals, and rambling about ancient Egyptian alien hieroglyphs seemed utterly ridiculous. However, the paycheck offered by Roland Emmerich and the production studio was simply too substantial to walk away from. Begrudgingly, Spader signed the dotted line, fully resolved to show up, recite his ridiculous lines about interstellar gateways, collect his fat check, and erase the entire embarrassing affair from his memory. Irony played the ultimate hand. The sci-fi project he treated as a mindless cash grab ended up becoming a global cultural phenomenon, defining his Hollywood legacy and launching a multi-decade franchise that fans still obsess over today. Kurt Russell's blunt trailer raid reality check. James Spader's utter disdain for the material didn't just stay inside his head. It actively threatened to stall production once cameras started rolling in the scorching Yuma Desert. During the early days of filming, Spader's frustration reached a boiling point over a scene he felt was so poorly written and logical gap-ridden that he flat-out refused to step out of his air-conditioned trailer to perform it. As director Roland Emmerich and the rest of the crew stood sweating under the blistering desert sun while valuable daylight ticked away, production ground to a complete standstill over Spader's artistic protest. Enter Kurt Russell. Playing the stoic, grieving Colonel Jack O'Neill, Russell was an old-school Hollywood veteran who had zero patience for high-minded actor drama on a big-budget blockbuster set. Seeing the crew suffer while Spader pouted, Russell marched over, kicked open Spader's trailer door, and confronted his co-star head-on. Without mincing words, Russell laid down a blunt reality check that instantly deflated the situation. Russell essentially told him that neither of them was there to make Hamlet or win an Academy Award. They were being paid massive sums of money to stand in a desert, play make-believe, and make a fun summer popcorn flick for the masses. Russell reminded Spader of the astronomical paychecks they were both receiving, telling him to leave his pretension at the door, get out into the heat, and do the job he was hired to do. The direct, no-nonsense confrontation hit Spader like a cold bucket of water. Realizing the absurdity of his protest, Spader dropped his refusal, walked out onto the set, and filmed the scene. The blunt dynamic between the two stars didn't just save the shooting schedule, it translated into the pitch-perfect odd couple friction on screen. J. Davidson's $1 million ransom backfire. When it came time to cast Ra, the terrifying and ethereal alien sun god, director Roland Emmerich had one specific actor in mind: J. Davidson. Davidson had just rocketed to international stardom and earned an Academy Award nomination for his breakout role in The Crying Game, 1992. However, Davidson completely loathed the intense spotlight of Hollywood. The sudden fame, relentless press junkets, and loss of privacy deeply unnerved him, and he was firmly resolved to retire from acting altogether to return to his quiet life working in fashion design. When Emmerich offered him the role of Ra, Davidson didn't want anything to do with it. But rather than simply saying no, he decided to test the studio's limits. Believing no production company in their right mind would pay an inexperienced actor such a bloated figure for a supporting role, Davidson demanded a staggering $1 million fee. In his mind, it was an outrageous ransom price meant to force the studio to walk away and leave him alone. To his absolute horror, the producers didn't even hesitate. They immediately agreed to his demands and cut the check. Caught in his own trap, Davidson was legally bound to take the job. He found himself flown out to a scorching desert, strapped into heavy, suffocating ancient costumes, and forced to play an otherworldly tyrant. The $1 million payout made him rich, but it cost him his immediate freedom, dragging him right back into the Hollywood spotlight he was desperately trying to escape. The naked set protest. On the final day of filming. If J. Davidson was miserable about being forced into the role of Ra, his physical experience on set only made things infinitely worse. To transform him into the regal alien ruler, the costume department outfitted him in towering metal headpieces, heavily embroidered collars, massive jewelry, and thick silk robes. Under the brutal 120-degree heat of the Yuma Desert sound stages, these elaborate garments acted like a portable sauna. The heavy fabrics trapped the searing heat against his skin, making every single minute in front of the camera a grueling physical endurance test. By the time the final day of principal photography arrived, Davidson had reached his absolute breaking point. He had endured months of grueling heat, endless wardrobe adjustments, and a Hollywood machine he actively despised. The instant director Roland Emmerich called the final cut on Davidson's very last scene. The actor didn't wait to walk back to his trailer, nor did he wait for wardrobe assistants to carefully unbutton his delicate garments. In full view of the shocked cast, crew, and extras, Davidson stripped off every single piece of his multi-thousand-dollar raw costume right there on the open set until he was completely stark naked. Leaving the priceless alien wardrobe crumpled in a heap on the desert sand, he turned around and walked off the set without saying a word to anyone. It was the ultimate unfiltered protest, a silent, nude declaration that he was officially done with Ra, done with the desert, and permanently done with Hollywood acting. With the stars causing chaos in front of the camera, the background performers were fighting a far more dangerous battle against the punishing desert elements, the unbearable sizzle of the Horus guard suits. While the main stars were busy airing their grievances, the background extras playing Ra's imposing Horus and Anubis guards were enduring a literal physical nightmare. To achieve the movie's stunning, practical aesthetic, the art department designed heavy, full-body armor, constructed from thick fiberglass, dense metals, and heavy leather padding. Atop these suffocating suits sat massive, intricate animal helmets featuring glowing red eyes. To create that iconic, menacing glow, prop designers wired intense, high-voltage incandescent light bulbs directly into the tight interiors of the helmets, positioned just inches away from the performers' faces and foreheads. In the blistering 120-degree heat of the Yuma Desert, these armored costumes turned into Iron Maiden heat traps. The internal light bulbs radiated scorching heat straight onto the actors' scalps, while the airtight fiberglass helmets provided virtually zero ventilation or fresh airflow. Within minutes of donning the gear, extras were breathing in trapped superheated air while their sweat had nowhere to evaporate. The metal and fiberglass absorbed the relentless desert sun, raising the temperature inside the suits to a blistering, dangerous sizzle. It didn't take long for disaster to strike on set. Performers began passing out mid-take, collapsing like lead weights onto the hot sand due to severe heat exhaustion and dehydration. Production medical staff had to stay on constant high alert, rushing onto the set between takes with industrial ice packs and water bottles to cool down the fainting extras. To keep the shoot from grinding to a halt, crew members were forced to rig makeshift cooling hoses that pumped blasts of cold air directly up the bottom of the suits between shots. It was a brutal test of endurance, proving that looking like an intimidating alien god came at a terrifying physical price. Stick figures and animatronic dogs, cheating the desert shots. To create the illusion of an endless alien desert filled with thousands of enslaved workers constructing Ra's colossal pyramid, director Roland Emmerich needed epic scale. However, the film's budget was nowhere near big enough to hire, feed, and transport thousands of human extras out to the remote Yuma sand dunes every day. Faced with severe financial limits, the production team resorted to some of the most hilarious, low-tech optical illusions and practical cheats in modern sci-fi history. Instead of hiring thousands of real people, the art department crafted hundreds of tiny, wooden stick figures. They wrapped these crude wooden pegs in miniature scraps of burlap and rag cloth, driving them into the distant sand dunes in long, neat rows. When filmed from afar, through the shimmering heat waves of the desert horizon, the static wooden sticks looked convincingly like vast crowds of overworked laborers toiling in the sun. The low-budget trickery didn't stop with the human crowds. For the iconic Mastage, the large, shaggy alien beast of burden that drags Daniel Jackson across the desert, the production couldn't rely on costly CGI, which was still in its infancy. Their solution was to take a trained real-life dog, fit it with a custom-built, heavy fur costume, complete with synthetic horns, and lead it across the sand dunes. For shots requiring the beast to carry heavy loads or stand alongside the actors, they built a motorized, full-scale animatronic replica. Between the puppet dog and the field of wooden stick figures, the grand alien landscape was essentially a massive, cleverly disguised optical illusion held together by glue, burlap, and practical grit. The $140 million plagiarism lawsuit settled for pocket change. Behind the scenes of Stargate's massive box office victory lay an explosive legal battle that threatened to tarnish the film's entire success story. Shortly after the movie hit theaters in the fall of 1994, an unknown high school teacher named Omar Zuhdi filed a staggering $140 million plagiarism lawsuit against director Roland Emmerich, writer Dean Devlin, and production studio Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Zuhdi alleged that the duo had blatantly stolen the core concept of the film from a speculative movie script he had written years earlier while studying Egyptology at college. Zuhdi's manuscript, titled Timescape, featured an remarkably similar premise: an eccentric, ridiculed linguist who deciphers ancient hieroglyphs, discovers that aliens built the pyramids, and travels through a portal to a distant desert world ruled by an alien tyrant posing as an Egyptian god. To prove his case, Zuhdi produced documents showing he had pitched his original story directly to Hollywood executives in the late 80s. The parallels were so striking that the legal team representing Emmerich and Devlin realized going to a jury trial presented a massive financial risk. Rather than facing a prolonged, highly publicized court battle that could halt future franchise development, the studio chose to deal with the crisis quietly. Behind closed doors, MGM offered Zuhdi an undisclosed out-of-court settlement. Legal rumors circulated for years that Zuhdi received just $50,000 to drop the lawsuit and sign a strict non-disclosure agreement, though the true figure remains locked in secrecy. It was a bizarre, quiet ending to a legal firestorm that nearly rewrote the origin story of sci-fi history. With legal battles brewing behind the scenes, the visual effects team was facing an equally chaotic war inside a tiny garage, firing the VFX supervisor repeatedly in a garage. When you think of the iconic, shimmering, water-like portal of the Stargate, it feels like the gold standard of 90s digital filmmaking. But in reality, the effect was born out of complete desperation, constant terminations, and a tiny, makeshift studio inside a residential garage. Director Roland Emmerich wanted an event horizon that looked organic, fluid, and unlike anything audiences had ever seen before. However, the initial digital computer graphic tests were coming back looking stiff, artificial, and shockingly cheap. Unimpressed by the progress, Emmerich repeatedly fired his visual effects supervisors in a bid to find someone who could deliver his vision without destroying the budget. Enter visual effects artist Jeffrey A. Okun. Rather than burning through money on expensive computer rendering software that wasn't ready for the task, Okun decided to take a wildly low-tech, practical approach. He set up shop inside a cramped garage, filling a giant glass water tank with crystal-clear water and mounting a camera directly above it. To create the explosive, swirling wave effect of the gate opening, Okun fired high-pressure compressed air cannons directly into the water while simultaneously dropping in packets of instant iced tea powder and milk to give the liquid density and volume. When filmed upside down at high speeds, the turbulent, churning water created a mesmerizing visual effect that looked like a glowing cosmic doorway. CGI was then layered on top to enhance the color and metallic sheen, but the physical core of the portal was literally liquid dynamics captured in a garage bucket. The genius workaround saved millions of dollars, and produced an iconic visual that defined the look of the entire franchise for decades to come, proving that practical innovation often beats raw computing power. The Echo Chamber, Spruce Goose Dome. When production moved indoors to film the sprawling underground military complex of the Stargate Command Center, the production team faced a massive spatial dilemma. Building a multi-story military facility set required an enormous, clear-span indoor space that standard Hollywood sound stages simply couldn't provide. Searching for a massive location, producers settled on the colossal wooden hangar located in Long Beach, California, a legendary structure originally built to house Howard Hughes's famous spruce airplane, the Spruce Goose. While the cavernous dome offered all the physical floor space the art department could ever dream of, it brought along a nightmare set of acoustic and lighting engineering challenges that nearly ruined the shoot. The primary issue was the dome's bizarre, massive wooden architecture. Built almost entirely out of laminated fir wood, the gigantic cavern acted like a giant spherical echo chamber. Every quiet whisper, footsteps on the concrete floor, or dropped tool echoed relentlessly throughout the dome for seconds on end, completely destroying the production's live audio recordings. Sound engineers were left pulling their hair out, trying to isolate the actors' dialogue against the constant, booming reverberations bouncing off the curved wooden ceiling. Actors like Kurt Russell and James Spader had to strictly adjust their vocal delivery, enunciating every single word with extreme precision so their lines wouldn't dissolve into a muddy, unintelligible smear of metallic echoes. To make matters worse, the dome's massive volume trapped heat and humidity, creating an oppressive interior environment that exhausted the crew during long shooting days. Lighting technicians had to rig miles of heavy electrical cabling and hang massive light grids from the soaring wooden trusses just to illuminate the center of the set, turning the interior into a brightly lit, sweltering oven. The sound department eventually had to rely heavily on extensive post-production automated dialogue replacement, ADR, to re-record countless lines of dialogue in a clean studio environment. Shooting inside Howard Hughes's legendary hangar provided the sweeping, grand scale the director desperately wanted, but it turned everyday sound recording into one of the most frustrating, grueling technical battles of the entire production. The secret test screening disaster that scared MGM. Before Stargate hit theaters, MGM executives were quietly terrified that the movie was going to be a colossal commercial failure. To boost the film's pacing and make it feel more like a fast-paced action blockbuster, studio suits secretly recut the director's vision, slicing out crucial character development scenes. Most notably, they completely excised the heartbreaking backstory of Colonel Jack O'Neill, specifically the tragic accidental death of his young son. The studio believed that starting a fun summer sci-fi adventure with such a dark, grief-heavy tone would alienate family audiences and ruin the escapist fun. When Roland Emmerich's original cut was stripped down and shown to a secret test audience in California, the results were an absolute disaster. Viewers found Kurt Russell's character to be cold, unlikable, and reckless, without any clear emotional motivation. The test audience scores tanked, sending shockwaves through MGM's executive offices. Audiences simply couldn't connect with the lead hero, who seemed perpetually angry for no apparent reason. Realizing their massive editing mistake, Emmerich and producer Dean Devlin fought back, demanding that O'Neill's tragic backstory be restored to the film immediately. Once the deeply emotional scenes were reinserted, a second test screening was held. The difference was night and day. The audience's approval ratings shot through the roof. The tragedy gave O'Neill's journey a powerful emotional arc, turning a generic action archetype into a deeply human hero. The near-disastrous test screening proved that even the biggest sci-fi spectacles need genuine heart to truly resonate with audiences, creating an entire ancient Egyptian dialect from scratch. When director Roland Emmerich decided that the alien inhabitants of Abydos shouldn't speak modern English,
He created an incredible production hurdle for his cast, wanting authentic historical grounding rather than generic sci-fi gibberish. The filmmakers hired renowned Egyptologist Dr. Stuart Tyson Smith to invent a fully spoken, phonetically accurate version of ancient Egyptian. Because ancient Egyptian was a written language without recorded vowel sounds, Smith had to reconstruct how the ancient tongue might have sounded 3,000 years ago based on Coptic linguistic evolution.
This academic rigor turned into a grueling nightmare for the actors. James Spader, Jay Davidson, and the actors playing the local villagers were handed scripts written in complex phonetic transcriptions filled with unfamiliar glottal stops, harsh consonants, and bizarre vocal rhythms. The cast spent long, frustrating hours with vocal coaches, trying to memorize lines that felt completely alien to their tongues. Spader in particular had to deliver lengthy, complex monologues in this newly constructed language while simultaneously acting out scenes of intense discovery and confusion. The stress on set was palpable as actors constantly stumbled over the difficult pronunciations under the sweltering studio lights. However, the incredible effort paid off immensely on screen. Hearing the characters converse in a believable ancient dialect added an unparalleled layer of realism and cultural depth to the film. It raised the bar for sci-fi world-building, setting a linguistic standard that future television franchises would continue to build upon for decades to come. While the actors struggled to master ancient dialects, the film's soundtrack was being gambled on an absolute unknown, hiring an unknown record store clerk to score an epic. When producers were hunting for a composer to score their sweeping sci-fi epic, studio executives pushed hard for established big-name Hollywood maestros. But director Roland Emmerich wanted a fresh, unconventional sound, taking a massive gamble on a virtually unknown 32-year-old British musician named David Arnold. At the time, Arnold had only scored one tiny indie film and was literally working shifts at a local record store to make ends meet. Giving the keys to a multi-million-dollar orchestral soundtrack to a guy stocking CD shelves seemed like complete studio madness. But Emmerich trusted his gut. Arnold seized the opportunity with fanatical energy, pouring every ounce of his soul into crafting a grand, romantic, and booming orchestral suite. He arranged towering brass melodies, soaring strings, and haunting choral arrangements that gave the alien landscapes an immense sense of wonder and epic scale. When the studio suits finally heard his recorded score, performed by an 80-piece orchestra, any lingering doubts instantly evaporated into thin air. Arnold's triumphant theme didn't just elevate the film, it won a BMY Film Music Award and launched his legendary career, leading directly to scoring James Bond films like Tomorrow Never Dies and Casino Royale. A gamble on an unknown record clerk paid off with one of the most iconic, timeless sci-fi scores in cinema history. The Disappearing Act. Why Roland Emmerich was shut out of the TV franchise. Roland Emmerich and co-writer Dean Devlin originally envisioned Stargate as the grand opening chapter of a sprawling cinematic movie trilogy. They had elaborate story outlines for 2 full-length feature sequels that would explore other alien mythologies across the galaxy. However, those dreams were abruptly shattered when studio owner MGM realized the incredible goldmine they had on their hands. Looking to build a reliable cash cow, MGM decided to bypass expensive feature films entirely and pivot the property into a long-running cable television series. To Emmerich and Devlin's complete shock, MGM moved forward with Stargate SG-1 without their creative involvement, effectively locking the original creators out of their own universe. The studio recast the lead roles with Richard Dean Anderson and Michael Shanks, taking the lore in a completely different direction. Emmerich was famously furious over the move, publicly expressing his frustration that the studio hijacked his original trilogy plans to make what he felt was a low-budget TV spin-off. while SG-1 went on to become a massive, beloved hit that lasted 10 seasons. The bitter split left a permanent rift between Emmerich and the franchise. He spent decades trying to reclaim the rights to reboot his original trilogy, but the television universe had already permanently reshaped sci-fi history without him. From studio betrayals and stolen trilogies to last-minute visual patches, the final secret lies in an iconic alien feature added at the 11th hour: glowing alien eyes. Added as a desperate last-minute patch. When early test audiences gathered to watch rough cuts of Stargate, the studio received surprising and frustrating feedback regarding the main villain. Viewers complained that despite Jai Davidson's haunting performance, his character Ra just didn't feel threatening or otherworldly enough. Audiences viewed him as a spoiled, eccentric human emperor wearing lavish gold jewelry rather than a terrifying, ancient extraterrestrial parasite occupying a human host body. With the scheduled theatrical release date rapidly approaching, director Roland Emmerich and his post-production team needed an immediate, visually arresting way to constantly remind viewers of Ra's sinister alien nature. Lacking the time and budget to execute expensive reshoots, the visual effects artists scrambled for a quick digital fix. They settled on a simple, striking optical enhancement, adding a sudden, bright flash of glowing light across Ra's eyes during moments of intense emotion or threat. Because the movie had already been fully shot, artists had to manually trace and composite the glowing effect frame by frame onto Davidson's eyes in post-production. It was an arduous, last-minute patch designed entirely to solve a test screening complaint. The hasty visual fix proved to be an absolute stroke of genius. The sudden flare of glowing eyes added an instant layer of unnerving alien dread, transforming quiet scenes into terrifying displays of cosmic power. More importantly, this 11th hour emergency edition accidentally established one of the most defining pieces of lore in science fiction history. When MGM launched Stargate SG 1 year later, the glowing eyes became the signature physical trait of the entire Goa'uld species. What began as a desperate post-production fix to satisfy confused test audiences ultimately became the iconic visual trademark that anchored a television franchise for over a decade. That lasting legacy of Stargate. What started as a chaotic, high-stakes gamble in the Yuma Desert ultimately grew into one of the most successful and enduring franchises in sci-fi history. Against all odds, and despite set disasters, actor protests, and frantic last-minute visual patches, the 1994 film proved that audiences were hungry for high-concept cosmic mythology, paired with practical blockbuster scale. It shattered box office expectations, grossing nearly $200 million worldwide and proving that original sci-fi could stand toe-to-toe with established Hollywood giants. That single glittering movie portal opened the door to a sprawling television universe that captivated millions for over a decade. Stargate SG-1 ran for an astounding 10 seasons and spawned popular spin-offs like Stargate Atlantis and Stargate Universe, expanding a makeshift film into hundreds of hours of beloved television lore. The film's brilliant blend of ancient history, military adventure, and practical visual effects created a formula that fans still celebrate today. Behind the scenes, it may have been held together by garage hacks, iced tea powder, and sheer desperation, but on screen, it delivered pure cinematic magic that permanently altered the landscape of modern science fiction. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more facts, the weird, behind-the-scenes sci-fi stories.